Now, my friend, let's examine Lutheran historians and scholars regarding baptism by immersion. I can give but short extracts from a few among a host that press forward to testify. But first of all, let's let Luther, the father of Lutheranism, speak for himself.
Baptism is a Greek word and may be translated as immersion, as when we immerse something in water, that it may be wholly covered. And also it is almost wholly abolished, for they do not dip the whole child, but pour a little water on them. They ought to be wholly immersed. For that, the etymology of the term seems to demand.
Luther confesses that immersion in his day had been, quote, almost wholly abolished, end quote, and that sprinkling had taken its place. In the Schmalkaldum articles, which he drew up, he plainly states that, quote, baptism is nothing else than the Word of God with immersion in water, end of quote. And Mosheim, a Lutheran historian whose history is standard in both continents, says that in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries, immersion was the unbroken practice of the churches. Here is August Neander, a well-known Lutheran historian.
The practice of immersion in the 1st century was beyond all doubt prevalent in the whole church.
And here is a Lutheran scholar named Weiner in his lectures on Christian antiquity.
Effusion was first applied only to the sick, but was gradually introduced for others after the 7th century. And in the 13th, it became the prevailing practice in the West.
Here is another Lutheran historian, von Collin. In his History of Doctrines, he says this:
immersion in water was general until the 13th century. Among the Latins, it was then displaced by sprinkling, but of course retained by the Greeks.
And here's Dr. Gieseler, professor in the University of Bonn and Göttingen.
For the sake of the sick, the rite of sprinkling was introduced.
And finally, here's Dr. Kurtz, professor in the University of Dorpt, author of Christian History and Sacred History.
Baptism in the 1st centuries was administered by complete immersion. Sprinkling was only common in case of the rich.
And this last statement justifies the declaration of Dean Stanley that immersion, especially in cold climates, was very unsuitable to the tastes, the convenience, and the feelings of this class. There you have it, friend. Lutheran authorities testify to the fact that in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries, immersion was undoubtedly the practice of the early church. The Greek word baptizo means nothing else. Friend, if you have only been sprinkled as a newborn babe, you have not been baptized at all. Be on the lookout for our next video, where we will examine the testimony of Presbyterian scholars. Good day, friend.